They took my father's house, burned his bait shop, and planned to blame everything on the damaged veteran. Nobody would believe. By sunrise, my German shepherd had led me beneath an abandoned lighthouse, where a sinking bus, a hidden deed, and a voice from my father's past were waiting in the dark. What Rook discovered at Blackwater Point did not just expose a crime. It forced me to decide whether I was still a man worth saving. Before the story begins, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your support gives us the motivation to keep bringing you powerful stories about loyalty, courage, and the extraordinary bond between veterans and the dogs who never leave them behind. The night they took my father's house, the Atlantic was already climbing the seawall. I could hear it from the kitchen. Every few seconds, another wave struck the granite below the road, and the windows trembled in their frames. The sound was deep enough to travel through the floorboards and into my boots. It reminded me of distant artillery, except artillery had pauses. The ocean did not. Rook heard it too. My German shepherd lay beside the back door with his head raised and his ears angled toward the storm. He was 6 years old, nearly 90 pounds, and built like a shadow with shoulders. His coat was mostly black except for a streak of tan beneath his throat and 2 pale scars along his right side. One scar came from Afghanistan. The other came from saving me after we returned. Neither of us liked talking about those years. Rook because he was a dog. Me because I had run out of words. Across the kitchen table, my younger sister, Caroline, placed a folder between us. She did it gently. That was the part I remembered most clearly. People imagine betrayal arriving with shouting accusations or a fist striking a table. Sometimes it arrives with a careful hand and a voice so soft that you almost mistake it for kindness. "You need to sign this, Caleb." I looked at the folder but did not touch it. Rain rattled against the windows. The old brass clock above the stove said it was a little after 9 in the evening, but the sky had been black since late afternoon. "What is it?" Caroline folded her hands. Her husband, Martin Vale, stood behind her near the sink. He wore a wool coat that had never seen honest work and leather shoes polished brightly enough to reflect the kitchen light. He had driven down from Portland in a new silver sport utility vehicle and parked it where my father used to stack lobster traps. Martin answered for her. "It is an acknowledgement of occupancy." I looked at him. That sounds like something a man says when he does not want to admit he is evicting his wife's brother. His mouth tightened, but Caroline spoke before he could. "No one is evicting you." Rook lifted his head higher. I rested my hand against the back of his neck. "Easy." He did not growl. Rook rarely wasted sound. He watched Martin with the focused stillness of an animal that had spent years learning the difference between nervousness and danger. Caroline pushed the folder an inch closer. "Dad left the property to both of us." "I know, and the medical debts were larger than we expected." "I know that too. Martin found a buyer." That sentence settled between us. Outside, Waithill was hard enough to make the dishes tremble inside the cabinet. I looked around the kitchen. My father had built the cabinets himself when Caroline and I were children. The doors did not hang evenly anymore. One handle was shaped like a fish because I had chosen it at a hardware store when I was 9 years old. The blue paint above the stove had faded almost white from years of salt air. Our mother had died in this house. Our father had died in the room above us less than 5 weeks earlier. And Caroline had found a buyer. "For the bait shop?" I asked. "For everything." She did not look away. "The house, the shop, and the waterfront parcel." I felt Rook shift beneath my hand. Martin stepped forward. "North Star Coastal Development." I looked at him long enough for his confidence to weaken. North Star had been buying old properties along the Maine coast for 3 years. They purchased family wharves, small inns, boatyards, and weathered houses that had survived a century of winter storms. Then they flattened them and built private compounds for people who arrived in July and complained that the gulls were too loud. My father had refused their offers. He'd refused politely the first time. The second time, he had sent their representative away with language that would have embarrassed a sailor. The third time, he had released Rook from the back room. Rook had not attacked anyone. He had simply walked to the porch and sat down. The representative never returned. Not while my father was alive. "How long has this been arranged?" I asked. Caroline's eyes moved toward Martin. That was enough. How long, Caleb, she said. Please do not make this harder. How long? Martin exhaled through his nose. The preliminary agreement was signed 12 days ago. 12 days. I had spent those 12 days repairing storm shutters, clearing my father's workshop, and sorting through 50 years of rusted tools because Caroline said she could not bear to do it. For 12 days I had slept in the small room above the bait shop, while they arranged to sell the ground beneath my bed. You signed before telling me. We had to move quickly, Caroline said. The taxes are overdue. The roof needs replacement. The shop barely earned anything last year. Dad spent most of last year dying. Her face flinched. I regretted the words as soon as they left me, but I did not take them back. The truth does not become cruel because it is spoken in a quiet room. Martin placed both hands on the table. This is not personal. Rook stood. Martin froze. I kept my palm on Rook's shoulder. Everything a man calls impersonal is usually happening to somebody else. Martin's jaw hardened. You have no income, Caleb. No permanent employment. You have been living here without paying rent. I cared for my father. That was your choice. The room changed. I do not know whether Caroline heard it. I do not mean a sound. I mean the moment when a conversation crosses a line and cannot return. I looked at Martin. For most of my adult life, men had measured danger by how loudly another man spoke. They were usually wrong. The most dangerous moments I had ever known arrived quietly. Rook leaned against my leg. The pressure brought me back. I breathed once through my nose, then again. Caroline looked down at her hands. Martin did not mean it that way. Yes, he did. She closed her eyes briefly. I studied my sister and tried to find the girl who used to wait at the end of our driveway for my school bus. I tried to find the 14-year-old who had cried into my shirt when our mother died. I tried to find the young woman who had mailed handwritten letters to every deployment, even when I went months without answering. She was still there, but she was buried beneath fear, debt, and a husband who believed everything had a price if he spoke calmly enough. When does North Star take possession? I asked. Caroline whispered the answer. Tomorrow morning. The wind pressed against the house. I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, because tomorrow morning was less than 12 hours away, and the worst coastal storm in years was expected to make landfall before midnight. You expect me to leave tonight? The hotel in Rockland has a room, she said quickly. We paid for 3 nights, and after that she had no answer. Martin did. After that you make arrangements. Rook's nails clicked once against the floor. My hand tightened around his collar. 16 years in the Navy. More nights sleeping on steel, sand, and frozen ground than I could count. A shoulder that ached when the temperature dropped. Hearing in my left ear that faded whenever my pulse rose. A mind that could still remember every doorway where a friend had died, but sometimes forgot why I had walked into a grocery store. And after all that, Martin Vale was giving me 3 nights in a hotel. I am not signing. Martin stared at me. The sale can proceed without your signature. Then why are you here? His eyes moved to the folder. There it was. Not an acknowledgement, a surrender. You need me to waive my claim, I said. Caroline's face turned pale. Martin straightened. You have not contributed financially to the property. I own half on paper. Paper seems important tonight. Rook looked from Martin to me. I could feel the old pressure building behind my ribs. Not anger exactly. Anger burns hot. This felt colder. It was the same sensation I used to get before entering a building where somebody was waiting with a weapon. My father's voice returned to me. Never make your biggest decision while another man is rushing you. He had said that about buying a truck. It worked for betrayals too. I pushed the folder back. I will have an attorney read it. Martin gave a small, humorless smile. With what money? Caroline stood so quickly that her chair scraped across the floor. Stop it, Martin. He looked at her. She looked at me. For the first time that evening, the composure left her face. I cannot lose everything, Caleb. The words were barely audible. I understood then. This was not only about medical debt or taxes. Martin had used their home as collateral for one of his business projects. I did not know the details yet, but I saw the truth in Caroline's eyes. The sale was not saving our father's property. It was saving Martin. How much does he owe? I asked. Caroline began to cry without making a sound. Martin's face went flat. That is none of your concern. It became my concern when you sold my half of a house to cover it. He stepped around the table. Rook moved before I did. One moment he was beside me. The next he stood between us. He did not bare his teeth. He did not bark. He placed his body directly in Martin's path and raised his head. Martin stopped. Control that animal. He is controlled. Get him away from me. You are standing in his way. Martin's eyes narrowed. You think being a Navy SEAL gives you the right to intimidate people. I looked at him. I have not mentioned what I used to be. You never have to. You sit there with that dog and that look on your face, judging everyone. I'm not judging everyone. Only me tonight, yes. Caroline stepped between us. Enough. She wiped her cheeks with both hands. The storm siren began to sound down near the harbor. One long mechanical wail rolled over the town, followed by another. The county had ordered residents in the lowest areas to move inland. Our house sat above the evacuation line. The old life-saving station at Blackwater Point did not. My father had talked about that place when I was a boy. It stood 7 miles east beyond the last paved road, facing a section of coast where 3 ships had gone down before the lighthouse was built. The station had been abandoned since the late 1970s. Children in town said it was haunted. Fishermen said the cliffs beneath it were hollow. My father said both stories had been invented to keep fools away. The siren sounded again. Caroline picked up the folder. You can stay until the storm passes. Martin turned toward her. That is not the agreement. She looked at him with a firmness I had not seen in years. I said he can stay. Martin stared at her, then he glanced at me. You have until sunrise. I nodded once. It was more time than he deserved to believe he had given me. I went upstairs and packed. There was not much. 2 pairs of work pants, 3 shirts, a wool sweater that had belonged to my father, my service jacket, medication for my shoulder, a small first aid kit, Rook's food, folding bowl, leash, and veterinary records. At the bottom of the closet, I found an old photograph. My father stood beside his lobster boat, younger than I had ever known him. Caroline was sitting on his shoulders. I stood beside them with one hand on the boat and the other holding a wooden toy rifle full. I turned the photograph over. My mother's handwriting covered the back. My 3 stubborn men and the little girl who commands them all. For several seconds I could not breathe. Rook pressed his nose beneath my hand. I am all right, I told him. He did not believe me. Neither did I. I placed the photograph inside my jacket and walked downstairs. Caroline waited near the front door. Martin had gone outside to make a telephone call from his vehicle. I could see his silhouette through the rain-streaked window, one hand pressed to his ear. He is telling North Star that I refuse to sign, I said. Caroline looked toward the window. Probably. Did they know about the storm when they scheduled tomorrow? I do not know. Yes, you do. She folded her arms across herself. They want the buildings empty before the insurance inspection. I stopped. What insurance inspection? Her eyes filled again. Martin says there was damage from the last storm. He says North Star will handle it. The last storm had torn shingles from the bait shop and flooded the lower storage room. It had not damaged the main house. Did Martin file a claim? I do not know. I heard the lie. Before I could ask more, Rook turned sharply toward the back of the house. His ears rose. A low vibration came from his chest, not directed at Caroline, directed toward the harbor. What is it? She asked. I listened. At first there was only wind and rain. Then I heard an engine, heavy, diesel. A truck moved slowly along the waterfront road without headlights. It stopped near the bait shop. Rook crossed the kitchen and stood at the back door. Through the glass I saw 2 figures climb out. Both wore rain gear. One carried a metal container. The other carried what looked like a pry bar. Caroline whispered, "Who are they?" I set down my bag. Friends of Martin? No. The man with the metal container disappeared behind the bait shop. Rook scratched once at the door. Fuel. He could smell it. So could I now. The sharp scent slipped through the old frame around the door. I looked at Caroline. What did Martin say was damaged in the last storm? Her face went completely white. The lights went out. The refrigerator stopped humming. The kitchen fell dark except for the pale flashes of lightning beyond the windows. Rook barked once. The sound struck the room like a gunshot. I opened the back door. Rain hit me sideways. The truck engine roared to life near the shop. One of the figures shouted. The other ran from behind the building. I saw flame. It started low beneath the eastern wall, a thin orange line in the rain. Then it climbed through something that had been poured along the old wooden siding. "Call the fire department," I shouted. Caroline fumbled for her telephone. I ran. Rook stayed at my left side as we crossed the yard. Wind tore at my jacket. The rain was so heavy that the ground had already become mud. The truck accelerated toward the road. I caught only part of the license plate. Main registration, the final letters were K and V. Then it vanished into the storm. The fire spread faster than it should have. That told me everything. The bait shop was nearly 80 years old, dry inside despite the rain and filled with rope, oil, paint, wood, and memories. Flames found the roofline before I reached the first wall. I pulled open the side door. Smoke rolled over me. Rook tried to enter. I grabbed his harness. No, he fought me for 1 second, not out of disobedience but training. He believed someone might be inside. There is nobody there. He looked at me. I prayed I was right. The volunteer fire station stood less than 2 miles away, but the evacuation and fallen trees had slowed every response vehicle in the county. I dragged a hose from the house and opened the valve. Nothing came out. The power outage had stopped the well pump. Flames broke through the bait shop window. Glass exploded into the yard. Caroline came running through the rain. "They are coming. Go back to the house. What can we do? Get the propane cylinders away from the west wall." Her eyes widened. There were 4 cylinders stored beneath the overhang. If the fire reached them, we could lose more than the shop. We moved together. I took the first 2. Caroline rolled the third through the mud. Rook circled the building, barking toward the rear corner. I followed him. An extension cord ran from the shop toward the main house. That cord had not been there earlier. At the end of it, beneath the porch, sat a small device with a blinking red light. I pulled the plug. The light died, a remote ignition backup. This was not vandalism, it was planned. Behind me, the shop roof collapsed. A wave of sparks rose into the storm, twisting above the yard before the wind drove them toward the house. Caroline screamed. Burning pieces landed on the cedar shingles. I climbed the porch roof using the drain pipe and began knocking embers away with my jacket. Rain helped, but the wind kept carrying more. Below me, Rook barked toward the driveway. Martin's silver vehicle was gone. "He left," Caroline said. I looked down. "What? He left us?" The words broke something in her voice. I climbed down. The first fire engine arrived 9 minutes later. By then the bait shop could not be saved. The firefighters kept the flames from reaching the house, but most of my father's tools, his ledgers, his photographs, and the wooden boat model he had spent 11 winters building disappeared before midnight. Martin returned after the fire marshal arrived. He claimed he had driven inland to find a cellular signal. Nobody believed him, not even Caroline. The fire marshal found traces of an accelerant before dawn. He also found that the security camera behind the shop had been disconnected. Martin stood beneath the porch, arguing with an insurance representative on his telephone, while my father's life smoldered in the rain. That was when I understood what would happen next. The sale would be delayed. The insurance investigation would begin. Martin would say I had motive. I was the angry co-owner who had refused to sign. I was unemployed. I had military trauma. I had been present when the fire started. And I owned a trained dog that frightened people. Martin ended his call and walked toward the deputy sheriff. He did not look at me. He did not need to. The lie had already begun. I returned to the house and lifted my bag. Caroline followed me inside. "You cannot leave now. I cannot stay. The roads are closing." "I will manage, Caleb. Someone burned the shop." "I know. You could have been killed. That may have been the point." She stared at me. I could see her assembling the pieces. Martin's debt, the rushed sale, the insurance claim. The 2 men in the truck, her husband leaving while the property burned. "I did not know," she whispered. "I believe you." The relief on her face made me angrier than denial would have. Believing her did not undo what she had chosen. "Come with me," I said. She looked toward the staircase, then toward the front porch, where Martin stood with the deputy. Fear won. It usually does when given enough practice. "I cannot," I nodded, "then lock the doors after I leave." "Where will you go?" I looked at Rook. The hotel was inland, but Martin knew about it. The police would search there first if he accused me. I needed somewhere dry, defensible, and forgotten until I could contact an attorney I trusted. I thought about the abandoned life-saving station at Blackwater Point. 7 miles along the old coast trail, no road access, no electricity. A condemned building above cliffs that local people avoided even in summer. "I will find somewhere." Caroline grabbed my sleeve. Do not disappear again. I looked at her hand, then at her face. I did not disappear the first time. She released me. I opened the front door. The storm had swallowed the yard. Rain moved in silver sheets beneath the emergency lights. Firefighters crossed through smoke carrying hoses and axes. Behind them, the remains of the bait shop glowed like the ribs of a dying animal. Rook stepped onto the porch. I followed. The deputy called my name. I kept walking. He caught me near the road. Caleb Mercer? Yes, I need to ask you a few questions. You know where to find me tomorrow. Where is that? I will let you know. His expression tightened. Leaving during an active investigation does not look good. I turned toward him. Deputy, 2 men came here in an unmarked truck carrying fuel. My brother-in-law disappeared before the fire and returned after the fire marshal arrived. There is an ignition device beneath the porch. I told your office all of that. We will investigate. I hope you do. Where are you going? Somewhere those men are not. The deputy looked at Rook. Rook looked back. Keep the dog under control. He is the only reason we saw the fire in time. The deputy said nothing. I turned east. By the time we reached the end of the paved road, the emergency lights behind us had disappeared. The old coast trail began beside a collapsed fence. Grass and thorn bushes had swallowed most of it, but I remembered the direction from childhood. Rook moved ahead with his nose low. The rain changed to sleet. Every exposed part of my face began to sting. I had waterproof matches, half a bag of dog food, 1 bottle of water, a flashlight, and enough medication for 6 days. My telephone showed no service. Its battery was below half. It was a poor plan. Poor plans sometimes become necessary when every good option belongs to the person trying to destroy you. For the first mile, anger kept me warm. After that, the cold entered my hands. The trail climbed above the shore, threading between black spruce trees bent inland by decades of wind. To our right, the Atlantic struck the cliffs. I could not always see it, but I felt each impact beneath my feet. Rook stopped often. He checked the path, then looked back at me. I am coming, he waited anyway. Near midnight, we reached a wooden footbridge across a tidal ravine. Half of it was gone. The storm had torn the eastern section away, leaving 12 feet of dark water between the broken bridge and the far bank. Rook walked to the edge and studied it. No, he looked at me. We are not jumping that. He lowered his nose, moved upstream, and disappeared into the brush. I followed. 50 yards inland, a fallen spruce lay across the ravine. Its trunk was narrow, slick, and 6 feet above rushing water. Rook crossed first. He moved low, placing each paw carefully. Halfway over, he turned his head toward me. I see it. My left shoulder throbbed beneath the weight of the bag. My boots had filled with water. I could no longer feel 2 fingers on my right hand. The tree shifted when I stepped onto it. Below, brown water carried branches toward the sea. I moved sideways, keeping my weight low. The wind struck as I reached the middle. For 1 second, the ravine disappeared. I was somewhere else. Not Maine, not rain. Dust filled the air. A helicopter burned beyond a wall. Someone shouted my name through a radio filled with static. Then Rook barked, one sharp command. I saw him on the far bank. The ravine returned beneath me. I locked my eyes on the pale patch of fur below his throat. 1 step, I said, then another. I reached the far side on my knees. Rook pressed his body against my chest until my breathing slowed. I know. He licked rain from my chin. I know, partner. We continued east. The lighthouse appeared sometime after 1 in the morning. A pale flash swept across the storm, vanished, then returned. I stopped. The Blackwater lighthouse had been decommissioned decades ago. Its lamp should not have been working. The light came again, faint but unmistakable, moving across the trees. Rook saw it too. He moved faster. The life-saving station stood beneath the lighthouse, on a shelf of land above the cliffs. The main building leaned toward the ocean as though it had spent years listening to the waves. Half the roof was missing. Every window facing the sea had been boarded. The lighthouse tower stood 50 yards beyond it. A light turned slowly inside the lantern room. No modern beacon, a weaker yellow light. Someone was up there. Rook ignored the front entrance. He followed the eastern wall, nose close to the ground. Near the foundation, he found fresh boot prints turning into the grass. Not old impressions filled with rain. Fresh. One person had approached the building within the last hour. Rook's posture changed. His tail went level. The fur along his shoulders lifted. I removed the flashlight from my bag but did not turn it on. We followed the prints to the back of the station. A cellar door stood partly open. Warm air moved through the gap. It carried the smell of salt, kerosene, wet wool, and blood. Rook looked at me. Quiet, we entered. Stone steps descended beneath the building. The air grew warmer with each step. At the bottom I found a narrow room lined with old rescue equipment. Cork life jackets hung from iron hooks. A rusted hand pump stood near the wall. Coils of rope rested on shelves beneath decades of dust. Except one coil. One had been moved recently. The footprints crossed the floor and ended beside a wooden cabinet. Rook sniffed the cabinet, then scratched once. I opened it. Behind the shelves was a steel door. New scratches marked the lock. Someone had forced it open. Beyond it, a tunnel descended toward the cliffs. A wire ran along the ceiling. It was old, wrapped in cracked black insulation, but a faint current hummed through it. That wire led to the lighthouse. The yellow beam passed above us again. Rook entered the tunnel. I caught his harness, slow. He obeyed. We moved 30 yards beneath the ground before the passage opened into a circular chamber. An oil lamp burned on a table. Beside it sat a marine radio. Not an antique, a modern emergency unit connected to a battery. The radio speaker hissed. Then a woman's voice broke through the static. "Blackwater Station, please respond." Rook stepped closer. The voice returned, weaker this time. "We have 11 residents aboard. The driver is injured. Water is entering the vehicle." I took the microphone. "This is Blackwater Station. Identify your location." Static swallowed the first answer. Then I heard 3 words, St. Arson Causeway. My blood went cold. St. Arson was a retirement home on a narrow coastal island 4 miles north of the station. Its only causeway crossed a tidal marsh barely above sea level. At high tide, the road disappeared. During a storm surge, it became a river. I pressed the transmit button. "How long have you been trapped?" A man shouted in the background. Someone was crying. The woman answered, "Almost an hour. The emergency doors will not open. Most of my passengers cannot swim." Rook turned toward the far side of the chamber. A second tunnel disappeared into darkness. Painted above it were 3 faded words. "To the North Cove." The old rescue tunnel ran beneath the cliffs in the direction of St. Arson. The woman's voice came through one final time. "Please hurry. The water is at our seats." Then the radio went silent. The radio hissed in my hand. "St. Arson, respond." Nothing. I pressed the button again. "This is Blackwater Station. Can you hear me?" Only static answered. Then, somewhere beneath the noise, I heard a dull metallic crash. A woman screamed. The signal vanished. I set the microphone down and looked toward the tunnel marked North Cove. Rook was already standing at the entrance, his nose lifted into the moving air. The tunnel carried the smell of seawater, old iron, damp stone, and something faintly mechanical. Diesel exhaust. A vehicle was still running somewhere beyond the cliffs. I checked my telephone. No signal. The battery showed less than 1/4. The retirement home residents had already been trapped for nearly an hour. At their age, cold water did not need much time. Even water that reached only the waist could pull heat from a body faster than most people understood. The storm surge was still rising. The nearest road rescue crew would have to approach from the inland side of the causeway, assuming the road had not already disappeared. I had one dog, a flashlight, a small first aid kit, and no idea whether the tunnel still reached the North Cove. It was not enough. It was what I had. I knelt beside Rook and tightened his harness. The scars along his side shifted beneath my fingers. "Search and guide." His ears rose. That command had once meant ruined villages, collapsed buildings, and rooms where men waited behind doors. Tonight it meant 11 elderly people inside a sinking transport bus. Rook stepped into the tunnel. I followed. The passage descended gradually, carved through black stone that glistened with moisture. Old copper brackets lined one wall, remnants of a lighting system installed before either of us was born. Most held nothing. A few still contained broken glass bulbs clouded by salt. The wire from the chamber continued overhead. Whoever had restored the radio had also restored part of the old electrical line. That meant someone had been maintaining the station. The fresh boot prints were proof, so was the lamp. The question was why that person had disappeared before we arrived. After 50 yards, the tunnel split. The painted words above the left passage had almost faded away. Boat ramp. The right passage carried a newer mark scratched into the stone. Cove. Rook sniffed both openings. He chose the right one. The sound of the storm faded behind us, but another sound grew stronger ahead. Water, not the regular strike of waves against rock. This was running water, fast and confined. The floor began to slope more sharply. My boots slipped twice on algae-slick stone. Rook shortened his stride and kept looking back, measuring my pace. "I am with you." The tunnel narrowed until my shoulders nearly brushed both walls. Then Rook stopped. His body went rigid. I raised the flashlight. The floor ended 6 feet ahead. A section of the tunnel had collapsed, leaving a jagged opening above a channel of seawater. The far side remained intact, but nearly 12 feet of stone had fallen away. Water rushed through the gap and disappeared beneath the rock. Rook stepped to the edge. No, he looked across. The distance was too far for him to jump safely on such wet stone. Even if he made it, the landing area was narrow. A single slip would send him into the channel below. I swept the flashlight along the walls. An old iron rail ran across the ceiling. A rescue boat might once have been from it and pushed through the passage during calm weather. Most of the rail had rusted, but one section extended across the break. A chain hung from it. I pulled the chain. It groaned but held. Near the wall, I found a rotting wooden platform attached to 2 iron wheels. It might once have carried supplies. The wood would not support me. It might support Rook. I tested the frame with my boot. The boards cracked, but the iron base stayed firm. I clipped Rook's harness to the hanging chain and guided him onto the platform. He resisted. Not from fear. He did not want to be separated from me. "Stay." His eyes locked on mine. "I will follow." I pushed the platform toward the gap. The iron wheels screamed against the rail. Rook lowered his body and balanced as the platform moved over the rushing water. Halfway across, one wheel caught. The platform swung sideways. Rook's paws slipped. He dropped against the harness. The chain snapped tight. "Hold." He twisted, found the edge of the platform, and pulled one front paw back onto the wood. I reached along the rail and shoved with both hands. Pain tore through my left shoulder. The platform moved. 1 inch. Then another. The wheel broke free. Rook reached the far side and jumped down. I exhaled. My shoulder throbbed so hard that my fingers tingled. Rook turned immediately and searched for a way back to me. "Stay there." I looked at the broken tunnel floor. The remaining rail was thick enough to hold my weight if the anchor points were not completely rusted. That was a dangerous assumption, but the water below offered no second attempt. I pulled off my bag, clipped it to the chain, and pushed it across. Then I climbed. My hands closed around the cold rail. I lifted my boots off the ground and began moving over the gap, one arm at a time. The storm surge roared beneath me. Halfway across, the metal shifted. A rusted bracket tore loose from the ceiling behind me. The rail dropped several inches. My injured shoulder nearly failed. For 1 second I saw bright white light. My left hand opened. I hung from my right arm. Below me, black water slammed against stone. Rook barked. Not panic. A command. "Focus." I swung my legs forward and caught the far ledge with the toe of one boot. The edge crumbled. I tried again. My heel found stone. Rook grabbed the sleeve of my jacket and pulled. I rolled onto the tunnel floor beside him. For several breaths, neither of us moved. Then Rook placed one paw against my chest. "I am alive." Mostly. I sat up and tested my shoulder. It had not dislocated, but something had strained badly. Raising my arm above my head sent a sharp line of pain down to my elbow. I swallowed one of my tablets without water. Then we continued. The air grew colder. The diesel smell strengthened. After another 100 yards, the tunnel opened into an underground boat chamber. Stone steps rose toward a pair of wooden doors built into the cliff face. The doors shook each time a wave struck outside. An old rescue skiff rested upside down on a cradle. Its hull was cracked from bow to stern. Beside it stood a newer aluminum boat. Not new in years, but maintained. The outboard motor had fuel lines attached. A canvas cover protected the controls. 2 red fuel cans sat beneath a shelf. Someone had prepared this place for use. Rook circled the boat and found a gray wool blanket on the floor. It was wet. He sniffed it, then moved towards the stone steps. Fresh blood marked one edge, not much, a handprint perhaps. I touched it, still tacky. The person who had restored the station had been here recently and was injured. Find. Rook followed the scent toward the doors. A steel lever operated the locking mechanism. I pulled it down. I tried again. The doors had swollen inside their frame. A wave struck outside. Water sprayed through the seams. I braced one boot against the wall and forced the lever lower. The mechanism groaned. Rust broke loose and scattered across the floor. The left door shifted outward. Wind seized it. The opening widened violently, and seawater exploded into the chamber. I grabbed the wall. Rook moved behind me. Through the doorway I saw the North Cove. The scene was almost completely black except when lightning opened the sky. The cove was surrounded by high cliffs, which protected it from the largest waves. But the storm surge had flooded the narrow beach and turned it into a churning inlet. The aluminum boat might survive inside the cove. It would not survive beyond the point. Fortunately, St. Arson Causeway lay across the marsh to the north, not out in open water. A tidal creek connected the cove to that marsh. If the creek had enough depth, the boat could reach the stranded bus. If it did not, we would run aground halfway there. I checked the fuel tank, nearly full. The key rested beneath the control panel. Whoever owned the boat had expected to return. I lowered it from the cradle using a hand winch. My shoulder protested with every turn. Rook watched the rising water around my boots but remained still until I guided him aboard. The engine started on the third attempt. Its roar filled the chamber. I untied the bowline and eased the boat through the open doors. Rain struck my face like thrown gravel. The cove disappeared and returned with each sweep of lightning. I followed the northern cliff until I found the mouth of the tidal creek. The channel was barely 30 feet wide. Flooded reeds bent flat beneath the wind. The water carried branches, trash cans, sections of fencing, and pieces of someone's dock. Rook stood at the bow with his body low and his nose pointed into the storm. He had ridden in military boats before, though never through a flooded Maine marsh. Each time debris appeared, his head turned before I saw it. I followed his signals, left, right, slow. The beam from my flashlight barely reached beyond the bow. The engine struck something beneath the water. The boat jumped. I killed the throttle. We drifted sideways toward a stand of flooded trees. I restarted the engine. The propeller turned, but the boat barely moved. Something had wrapped around it. I leaned over the stern and reached into the water. A length of fishing net had tangled around the propeller shaft. The current pulled at my arm. My fingers went numb almost immediately. I cut the net with the rusted knife from the station supplies. The blade slipped and opened the skin across my palm. I did not feel the pain until the blood mixed with the rainwater. Rook whined once. I have had worse. That was true. It did not make the cut harmless. I wrapped my hand with a strip from the first aid kit and restarted the engine. The boat moved. The creek widened after several minutes, opening into the marsh north of the station. The causeway should have been visible ahead. It was gone beneath the surge. Only the tops of road signs and guardrail posts showed above the water. Then lightning illuminated the bus. It sat at an angle 50 yards away, one side pressed against a broken section of guardrail. Water had reached the lower edges of the windows. The transport vehicle was smaller than a city bus, built for perhaps 15 passengers. Its emergency lights flashed weakly. 3 people were visible through the windows. One pounded against the glass. I drove toward them. The current grew stronger near the submerged road. It pushed the stern sideways, threatening to pin us against the bus. I turned into the flow and used the engine to hold position. Rook barked. A figure stood on the roof. An elderly man in a soaked sweater held one arm around a woman while waving with the other. The woman's white hair whipped across her face. I brought the boat alongside. "Can you hear me?" The man nodded. "The driver's trapped," he shouted. "The doors will not open. How many people are inside?" 10, including him. Ruth and I climbed through the roof hatch. The woman beside him looked barely conscious. Her lips had turned blue. I passed him a line. "Secure this to the roof rack." His hands shook too badly to tie it. I climbed onto the side rail of the boat and reached for the bus. The gap between us opened and closed with the current. Rook watched me. "Stay." I stepped across when the hulls moved together. My boot landed on the bus roof. The current immediately pulled the boat away, but the line held. I helped the woman down first. Rook moved toward her as soon as she entered the boat. He pressed against her legs and blocked her from falling. The old man stared at him. "He is trained," I said. "Hold his harness." The man obeyed. I opened the roof hatch wider and looked inside. Cold water filled the aisle. Passengers stood or sat on the highest parts of the seats. Some wore nightclothes beneath thin coats. One woman held an oxygen bottle against her chest. Near the front, the driver was pinned behind the steering wheel. The woman from the radio stood on a seat below me. She wore a St. Arson staff jacket. Blackwater Station? That is me. Her expression changed. You are not the station keeper. No, where is Elias? Who is Elias? She looked toward the storm. He called us before the line went dead. He said he was coming. The blood on the blanket, the fresh prints, the light in the tower. Elias had been the person maintaining Blackwater. What does he look like? Late 70s, white beard, dark coat. He walks with a cane. An injured man in his late 70s had attempted to rescue them alone. Did he say where he was? He said he was opening the north tunnel. I had seen no one, but the tunnel contained more than one passage. He might still be somewhere beneath the cliffs. I pushed the thought aside. First the bus. We need to move everyone through this hatch. The caregiver shook her head. Mrs. Bell cannot climb. Neither can Mr. Hanley. The driver's leg is trapped. Who can move? 5, maybe 6. Send them first. One by one, the passengers climbed onto the roof. The first was a retired schoolteacher named Walter, who apologized for being slow while his hands bled from broken glass. The second was a woman named Bernice, who refused to leave without her handbag. The third was nearly blind and kept asking whether the dog was friendly. Rook answered by placing his head beneath her hand. The boat could not hold everyone safely at once. I took the first group toward higher ground. A cluster of pine trees rose from a small ridge 200 yards inland. The water there reached only the trunk's lowest branches. Beyond them, I saw the upper floor of a maintenance building. I brought the boat to a rear loading platform. The door was locked. I kicked it twice. My shoulder sent pain across my chest. The lock broke. Inside, the building was dark but dry on the upper level. We found blankets, a battery lantern, and a first aid cabinet. I left Rook with the passengers. He did not like it. Neither did I. But Ruth's body temperature was falling, and the nearly blind woman panicked whenever I moved away from her. Guard and comfort, I told him. He sat beside them. I returned to the bus. The second trip was hard. The vehicle had shifted against the guardrail. Water moved through the interior in fast, dark currents. The caregiver passed 2 more residents through the roof hatch. A thin man named Arthur wore an old Navy cap. He looked at me and said, "You were military." It was not a question. Once, no such thing. Even half frozen, he sounded certain. I helped him into the boat. The second resident was a woman named June, whose hands had locked around a wooden picture frame. Inside was a photograph of a young soldier. "My son," she said. I secured the frame inside my jacket. "You can hold it again when we reach shelter." She nodded. Then the bus moved. A deep metallic groan came from beneath us. The broken guardrail bent. The front of the bus dropped another foot. Water surged through the windows. The passengers inside screamed. The caregiver lost her footing and disappeared beneath the surface. I reached through the hatch, caught the back of her jacket, and pulled. She surfaced coughing. "The rail is failing," I said. "We have minutes. The others cannot climb." Then we open another exit. The rear emergency door was underwater. The side windows were designed to release, but the bar freefees had warped under pressure. I found the red emergency handle above the nearest window and pulled. Nothing. I kicked the glass. It held. Arthur reached into the boat and lifted a small emergency hammer mounted near the controls. "Use this." I struck the lower corner. The window shattered inward. Water rushed through the opening. That made the flooding worse, but it gave us an exit closer to the passengers who could not reach the roof. I tied a rescue line around my waist and secured the other end to the boat. "Keep the engine running," I told Arthur. He looked at the controls. "I have driven worse." I believed him. I entered the bus through the broken window. The cold struck through every layer of clothing. My legs went numb before I reached the aisle. The caregiver guided me toward Mrs. Bell, a small woman with severe arthritis. I lifted her from the seat. She weighed almost nothing. That frightened me more than if she had been heavy. We moved her through the window and into the boat. Arthur wrapped her in a blanket. I went back for Mr. Hanley. He was a broad man with a surgical brace around one knee. He tried to stand and cried out. "I cannot bend it," he said. "You do not need to." I pulled him across at the seat, supporting his injured leg. The bus shifted again. A window broke near. Water struck us from the side. For a moment I lost my grip. Mr. Hanley slid toward the aisle. The caregiver caught his coat. Together we moved him to the window. Arthur and June pulled him into the boat. Only the caregiver and driver remained. The driver's name was Thomas. The steering column had trapped his left leg between the dashboard and the seat frame. Blood moved through the water around his boot. I tried to lift the column. It did not move. "No, you have the residence." I said no. He grabbed my sleeve. "The bus is going." The rear wheels had already lifted from the submerged road. The current pulled the vehicle against the remaining section of guardrail. The metal screamed under the strain. I looked at the caregiver. "What is your name, Mara? Get through the window." "I am not leaving him. You are going to hold the boat against this side. When I free him, you pull." She hesitated. "Go." Mara climbed out. Thomas looked at me. "You cannot lift that." "Probably not." I reached beneath the dashboard. The seat frame was bolted to the floor. The steering column had bent downward when the bus struck the rail. I needed leverage. A red fire extinguisher floated near the front door. I grabbed it and wedged it beneath the column. Thomas understood. He placed both hands against the dashboard. "On 3, he asked. "No, when the bus moves." "What?" "The current will lift the front when the guardrail breaks. For 1 second the pressure on your leg may change. And if it does not, then this was a poor idea." He laughed once. It sounded almost like a cough. The bus groaned. I braced the extinguisher beneath the column, ready. The guardrail snapped. The entire vehicle rotated. The front rose. I pushed down with all my weight. Pain exploded through my shoulder. The column lifted less than an inch. Thomas pulled. His boot remained trapped again. The bus rolled farther. Water surged to my chest. I repositioned the extinguisher and forced it down. The metal bent. Thomas screamed, then his leg came free. I grabbed him beneath the arms and pulled toward the broken window. The bus tilted sharply. The aisle became a wall. Thomas fell against me. The rescue line tightened around my waist as the boat moved with the current. Mara reached through the window. She caught Thomas's jacket. Arthur caught her belt. Together they dragged him out. I followed. The bus broke free completely. For a moment the roof remained visible beside us. Then the current rolled it onto its side and carried it into the flooded marsh. The rescue line nearly pulled me overboard. I cut it. The bus disappeared into darkness. Arthur stared after it. "You stayed too long. I hear that often." Mara pressed a blanket against Thomas's injured leg. I took the controls. The boat sat dangerously low in the water. Every passenger remained silent during the return trip. They had crossed the point where fear became exhaustion. I watched the channel ahead and tried not to feel my hands. When we reached the maintenance building, Rook was waiting on the platform. He barked once when he saw me, then he ran to the boat. His nose moved over my wet clothes, my injured hand, and my shoulder. "I am still here." He pressed against my leg. Inside the building, the rescued residents gathered close together beneath blankets. The battery lantern cast a weak yellow circle around them. Ruth's color had improved slightly. Mrs. Bell shivered uncontrollably. Thomas remained conscious, but the bleeding from his leg would not stop. I cleaned the wound as well as I could and tied a pressure bandage above it. Mara watched my hands. "You have done this before." "Yes, where?" "Places without retirement homes." Arthur sat nearby, holding his Navy cap between both hands. "What unit?" I looked at him. "Not tonight." He nodded as though he understood more than I had said. Rook moved through the room, checking each person. He stopped beside June, who still waited for her photograph. I returned it to her. She pressed the frame against her chest. "My son died 32 years ago," she said. "I still talk to him every morning." "You should. Do you talk to yours?" The question caught me off guard. "I do not have a son." I did not ask that. Her eyes were cloudy but steady. She meant the dead, the men I had carried, the men I could not carry, the ones whose voices returned whenever wind sounded like rotors. "Yes," I said, "sometimes." "Then you are not alone when you do." Rook rested his head on her knee. June smiled. Outside, the storm continued to strike the building. We had rescued 11 people. No one had died. It should have felt like victory. Instead, I kept thinking about the blood on the blanket in Blackwater Station. Elias had expected them. Elias had opened the tunnel. Elias had not reached the bus. I looked at Mara. "When did he call you?" "About 40 minutes before you answered." "Did he sound injured?" "He sounded tired. Then I heard something fall. Where? I do not know. He said he was beneath the lighthouse. Rook stood with me. Mara looked toward Thomas. You cannot leave us. The water is dropping inside this building. The emergency services will reach you when the surge turns. You do not know that, no, but I know a man named Elias may be trapped in those tunnels. Arthur placed his cap on his head. Then you go. Mara turned to him. We need him here. Arthur shook his head. We needed somebody to come for us, and he did. Now somebody else needs the same thing. I checked the bandage on Thomas's leg one final time. Mara, keep pressure here. Do not loosen it unless the foot turns completely white or cold. She nodded. I handed her my flashlight. You need this more. What will you use? I looked at the battery lantern. Then at the storm, the lighthouse. The moving yellow beam still swept faintly across the marsh. Whoever had turned it on had left a path home. Rook and I returned to the boat. The outgoing current had begun to strengthen. The tide was turning. That helped us move south, but it also dragged debris toward the cove. Twice, large branches struck the aluminum hull. Once the engine stalled after swallowing reeds. Rook never left the bow. The lighthouse beam appeared at regular intervals. Each time it passed over us, I adjusted our direction. When we reached the underground boat chamber, the water had risen almost to the equipment shelves. I secured the boat and climbed onto the stone steps. Rook entered the tunnel first. The broken section remained ahead. Crossing it with my injured shoulder would be worse than before. I searched the boat chamber again. Behind the cracked rescue skiff, I found another passage. Its entrance had been hidden by the hull. Faded letters marked the wall. Keeper's access. The passage climbed steeply. Rook caught the blood scent immediately. We followed it. Drops marked the stone every few feet. At first they were small, then larger. Halfway up we found Elias's cane. It lay beside a broken wooden ladder. Above us the passage continued through a vertical shaft toward a round opening. A man groaned in the darkness. Elias? Silence. Then a voice answered. Who is asking? My name is Caleb Mercer. Mercer. The name sounded familiar to him. You know me? I knew your father. Rook barked once. The beam from the lighthouse swept above the shaft, briefly revealing a narrow ledge 15 feet up. A man lay across it, white beard, dark coat, one leg hung over the edge. Blood ran from his forehead. I am coming up, I said. No, that was not a question. The ladder is gone. I noticed you will fall. I have been told that before. I clipped Rook's leash to an iron ring in the wall. Stay. He stared upward at Elias, then he looked at me. I need you here. I began climbing the stone using cracks and old ladder bolts. My left arm could barely pull. I used my legs and right hand as much as possible. Halfway up, the stone beneath my boot broke loose. I dropped several inches. Rook barked below. Elias moved weakly on the ledge. Go back, he said. No, you sound like your father. That is not always a compliment. I reached the ledge and pulled myself beside him. He was thinner than I expected, but his eyes were sharp. Blood covered one side of his face. His left ankle bent at an unnatural angle. You answered the radio, he said. Yes, the bus? Everyone is alive. His eyes closed. For a moment I thought he had lost consciousness. Then he whispered, good. I examined his head wound. He had lost blood, but the cut appeared shallow. The ankle was worse. We need to get you down. He grabbed my wrist. No time. There is time. Not for this. He reached inside his coat and pulled out a small brass key attached to a leather cord. Your father told me you would come someday. I stared at him. My father believed I was moving to New Hampshire after he died. No. Elias's grip tightened. He believed they would force you out. The lighthouse beam turned above us. I heard machinery moving inside the tower. What is this key for? The chart room. What chart room? Under the keeper's house. Why did my father give it to you? Elias looked past me toward the shaft below. Because Blackwater does not belong to North Star. I felt the air change. What are you talking about? The station, the lighthouse, the North Cove, and 3 miles of coastal land. North Star believes the title was transferred decades ago. Was it? No. He pressed the key into my hand. The original deed is still here. The truth began taking shape before I wanted to see it. North Star had purchased properties on both sides of Blackwater Point. My father's waterfront parcel was the final northern access route. If they controlled the house, the shop, and the hidden station, they controlled an uninterrupted stretch of coast worth millions. The fire had not only been about insurance, it had been about destroying records. What did my father know? Enough to become dangerous. My chest tightened. He died of heart failure. Elias watched me. That is what the certificate says. The lighthouse mechanism clicked above us. Then the beam stopped. Darkness filled the shaft. From somewhere beneath the station came the sound of a steel door closing. Rook growled, low, certain. Elias looked toward the passage below. They found us. Who? He did not answer. A man's voice echoed through the tunnel. Caleb Mercer. I recognized it. Martin Vale had followed us to Blackwater Point. Martin's voice traveled through the stone passage beneath us. Caleb Mercer. He said my name slowly, as though we were standing across a conference table instead of inside a flooded tunnel beneath an abandoned lighthouse. Rook's growl deepened. I looked at the shaft. The darkness concealed the passage, but a faint white beam moved across the floor below. Someone carried a flashlight. Then a second beam appeared. Martin had not come alone. Elias tightened his hand around my sleeve. Do not let them reach the chart room. You said it was beneath the keeper's house. It is. There is another stairway beyond this shaft. How many ways into the station? More than your father ever told you. That seems to be a family tradition. Elias tried to sit higher against the ledge. Pain crossed his face. His injured ankle had swollen inside his boot, and the blood on his temple had begun to dry in the lines of his skin. He was in no condition to climb down, much less run. Below us, Martin called again. I know you are here. I leaned toward Elias. Can you move if I lower you? With help, you will have it. I removed the coil of rescue line from my bag and looped it around an iron bracket embedded in the shaft wall. The bracket was old, but the stone surrounding it remained solid. I tied a makeshift support around Elias's chest and beneath his arms. He watched my hands. You learned that in the service? I learned it before the service. My father made me work on his boat. A faint smile touched his face. He made everyone work. You knew him well? For almost 50 years. That answer carried weight, but the men below were moving closer. A boot scraped against stone. Rook shifted his body between the sound and the wall beneath me. I tied the final knot and lowered Elias from the ledge. His injured leg dragged against the stone. He clenched his teeth but did not cry out. Rook watched him descend. When Elias reached the floor, the dog moved close and allowed the old man to place one hand on his back for balance. I climbed down after him. My boots had barely touched the ground when a flashlight beam struck the far wall. Martin appeared at the passage entrance. 2 men stood behind him. I recognized one immediately. He was broad through the shoulders with a shaved head and a gray rain jacket. I had seen him outside the bait shop carrying the metal container. The second man was younger, with a narrow face and a cut above one eyebrow. He carried a pry bar. Martin wore the same wool coat from my father's kitchen. It was wet, torn along one sleeve and covered with mud. He looked at Elias, then at me. You should have gone to the hotel. I never cared for hotel pillows. His eyes moved to the brass key in my hand. For the first time, his expression changed, not much. But enough. You do not understand what you found. That sentence usually means the speaker hopes I will stop looking. The broad man stepped forward. Rook bared his teeth. The man stopped. Martin raised one hand. No one needs to make this worse. Elias laughed weakly. You burned his father's shop. Martin looked at him. You should have left this place years ago. It was not yours to give away. It belongs to North Star. No, Elias said. It never did. The younger man shifted the pry bar in his hand. Martin kept his attention on me. Caleb, your sister is frightened. The police are looking for you. You left an active fire scene, crossed into condemned property, and took a boat that does not belong to you. I used that boat to rescue 11 people. Then perhaps someone will thank you before they arrest you. Rook leaned forward. I touched his harness. Z. Martin looked almost amused. You think this is another mission. You think you found enemies and now everything makes sense. I think 2 men used fuel to burn my father's shop. You saw shadows in a storm. I saw him. I pointed toward the broad man. The man's face remained blank. Martin did not look back at him. You are exhausted, he said. You have a documented history of combat trauma. Your judgment is impaired. There it was. The foundation of the story he intended to tell. The unstable veteran, the dangerous dog, the misunderstanding in the storm. People believed simple explanations, especially when the truth required them to admit that a respectable businessman had sent men to burn an old man's property. Martin extended his hand. Give me the key. No. The documents Elias is protecting are meaningless. Even if a deed exists, it is obsolete. Then you do not need it. His hand lowered. The younger man smiled. That smile told me more than Martin's words. They were not leaving without the key. I studied the passage around us. The vertical shaft rose behind me. A narrow stairway climbed from the far wall toward the keeper's house. Between us and that stairway stood an steel gate secured against the stone. Elias had mentioned another route. I leaned closer to him. Can you reach the gate with the key? Not that key. He understood. His right hand moved slowly beneath his coat. The broad man saw it. He stepped forward. Rook lunged. I released only enough of the harness to let him move 3 feet. His bark exploded through the shaft. Both men recoiled. Martin shouted, "Control him, he is controlled." Elias pulled a small iron lever from beneath his coat and pressed it into my hand. Not a key, a removable handle. I saw the matching socket in the wall beside the steel gate. The younger man raised the pry bar. I moved first. I drove my shoulder into him before he could swing. Pain tore through my injured arm, but my momentum carried us both into the wall. The pry bar struck stone and fell. The broad man reached for Rook. That was a mistake. Rook caught the sleeve of his rain jacket and twisted. The man lost his footing and crashed to one knee. Rook released immediately and moved back to my side. Training, control, not rage. Martin pressed himself against the passage wall. You are proving exactly what I told them. Who did you tell? The sheriff, Caroline, North Star's attorneys. I pushed the iron handle into the wall socket. The mechanism resisted. I turned harder. The steel gate began to lift. Rust fell from its tracks. Elias moved beneath it first, using Rook's harness and the wall for support. I followed. The broad man tore his sleeve free and lunged toward the opening. I kicked the iron handle loose. The gate dropped. It struck the floor between us. The broad man grabbed the bars. Martin shouted my name. I picked up the handle from our side. You will not get far, he said. That depends on how long the gate holds. The younger man retrieved the pry bar. Not long, he said. I turned away. The stairway beyond the gate rose through a narrow stone passage. Elias could barely climb. His injured foot never touched the ground. He moved by pulling himself upward with one hand while using Rook's harness with the other. Every few steps he stopped to breathe. Behind us metal struck metal. The men were forcing the gate. How far? I asked. 2 levels, that means nothing in a tunnel. Then farther than you would like. The passage curved. A section of the ceiling had fallen, leaving only enough room to crawl beneath. I went through first and cleared loose stones. Rook followed. Elias lowered himself onto his side and dragged the injured leg behind him. The gate rang again in the distance. Martin's voice carried through the passage. Elias, North Star offered you more money than that place is worth. Elias stopped crawling. His face hardened. My wife died there. Martin answered from behind us. That does not make it valuable. Elias looked at me. That is the difference between men like him and men like your father. What difference? Your father believed memory gave land value. Martin believes value gives men the right to erase memory. We moved again. The passage ended beneath a wooden trapdoor. I pushed upward. The door opened into a dark room smelling of dust, lamp oil, and old. The keeper's house. Rain hammered the roof. One window had been covered with plywood. Another had cracked and allowed water to run down the wall. A cast iron stove stood near the center of the room. Maps covered 3 walls. Many were old maritime charts marked with hand-drawn lines and dates. Elias pointed toward a cabinet behind it. I helped him sit beside the stove. Rook remained at the trapdoor, listening. I moved the cabinet. It was heavier than it looked. My injured shoulder weakened with each pull. Elias reached toward the stove. There is dry wood inside the box. We do not have time for a fire. You are soaked. So are they. The first blow struck the gate far below. A second followed. Elias looked at me. You cannot read the documents if your hands stop working. He was right. I hated that. I fed wood into the stove and lit it with one of the station matches. The flame caught quickly. Someone had prepared the tinder recently. Elias had kept this place ready. I returned to the cabinet. Behind it, set into the wall, was a narrow brass plate with a keyhole. I inserted the key from Elias's cord. The lock turned. A section of the wall opened inward. The hidden room was no larger than a ship's cabin. Shelves lined both sides. Metal document boxes filled the lower shelves. Rolled maps occupied the upper ones. A wooden desk stood beneath a sealed window, and on that desk sat a black ledger. I opened the nearest metal box. Inside were deeds, tax records, court letters, and handwritten statements dating back more than a century. The paper smelled dry and faintly sweet with age. Elias appeared in the doorway, leaning on the wall. The original station was granted to the town after the wreck of the Mercy Belle. I know that name, you should. Your great-grandfather helped pull survivors from the water. The Mercy Belle had struck the reef off Blackwater during a winter storm in the early 1900s. Local fishermen had launched wooden boats when the federal rescue crew could not reach the wreck. My family had told the story for generations. I had always assumed parts of it were exaggerated. Elias pointed toward a framed document. The families who performed the rescue placed the land in a public trust. The station could never be sold for private development. If the Federal Service abandoned it, control returned to the descendants of the rescuers and the town. Why does North Star believe it owns the property? Because someone changed the county record during the 1980s. The original trust document vanished from the courthouse. But not from here, no. I examined the seal. The document appeared genuine, but I was not an attorney. Why did nobody challenge the transfer? Some tried. What happened? Records disappeared. Witnesses changed their statements. Families accepted settlements. Others died. My father? He refused. Elias moved toward the black ledger. Your father began recording every offer, threat, and visit from North Star's representatives. He also traced the company's shell corporations. He opened the ledger. Dates filled the pages. Names, property transfers. At the bottom of one page, I saw Martin Vale. Beside his name was an amount written in my father's handwriting. $180,000. I stared at it. That is Martin's debt? No, that was the first payment. For what? Your father believed Martin had been paid to persuade Caroline to sell. The storm seemed to recede behind the sound of my own breathing. I turned the page. Another payment, then another. The amounts had moved through businesses connected to Martin's consulting company. Near the final entry, my father had written a short sentence. Martin knows about the trust. He knows Caleb is the remaining obstacle. I read it twice. Why was I the obstacle? Because your sister signed a private agreement. You did not. She could not sell my share. Not legally. The gate rang again below. Closer now, the men had passed it. Rook turned toward the trapdoor and growled. Elias looked toward the hidden room. We need to move the documents. Where? The lighthouse gallery. That is the first place they will search, not the gallery above. The chamber beneath it. He pointed to a rolled chart marked with a red circle. Your father rebuilt the signal room. It has an independent transmitter. The radio in the lower chamber, connected to the same system. But the upper transmitter can reach the Coast Guard if the antenna survives the storm. I looked toward the broken window. The lighthouse beam stopped. The main line was cut. Can the transmitter work without it? There is a manual generator. Of course there is. Elias gave me a tired smile. Your father distrusted electricity he could not repair with a wrench. That sounded like him. I gathered the trust document, ledger, payment records, and several photographs into a waterproof canvas bag beneath the desk. One photograph showed Martin meeting the broadman near North Star's offices. Another showed the same unmarked truck that had been outside the bait shop. The final photograph made me stop. My father stood outside this keeper's house beside Elias. Between them was Caroline. The date written on the back was 7 months earlier. Caroline had been here. She knew? I asked. Elias looked at the photograph. She knew part of it. How much? Your father told her the station could not legally be sold. He asked her not to sign anything. She signed anyway. She was frightened. Everyone keeps saying that as though fear signs its own name. Elias did not answer. A heavy impact struck the trapdoor. Rook barked. The men had reached the room below us. I closed the hidden wall and moved the cabinet back into place. The passage to the lighthouse began through a narrow door behind the charts. We entered just as the trapdoor beneath the keeper's house opened. Martin shouted from below. I closed the door but found no lock. The passage climbed inside a covered walkway built between the keeper's house and lighthouse tower. Wind screamed through broken panels. Rain entered through gaps in the roof. Elias slowed further. His face had lost color. You are not making it up the tower on that angle. I have before, not tonight. The transmitter requires 2 people. Tell me how to use it. You crank. I tune. You can tune while sitting here. The controls are above. Behind us, the connecting door opened. A flashlight beam entered the passage. I lifted Elias onto my back. His injured leg hung beside my hip. My shoulder nearly collapsed under his weight. Rook moved ahead. The lighthouse door stood at the end of the walkway. Locked. Elias reached around my shoulder and pressed his palm beneath the lowest hinge. A hidden latch released. The door opened. We entered the tower. A spiral staircase climbed around the stone interior. The darkness above seemed endless. The lower floor contained iron gears connected to the original light mechanism. Several had been cleaned and lubricated. A hand crank projected from the central assembly. Elias pointed upward. The signal room is beneath the lantern. That is 6 floors, 5. You are a terrible liar. The door behind us shook. The men had reached the tower. I carried Elias up the stairs. Each turn narrowed. Each step pulled at my shoulder. By the 3rd level, my left arm had gone numb. By the 4th, Elias's breathing had become shallow. Rook climbed beside us, stopping at every landing to listen. The tower door opened below. Martin's voice echoed upward. You cannot transmit anything, Caleb. The antenna cable has been cut. Elias whispered near my ear. He is lying. How do you know? He would not be climbing if he believed that. We reached the signal room. I lowered Elias beside the control panel. The equipment looked like something assembled from several different decades. Old brass dials sat beside newer switches. A microphone hung from a hook. Thick wires ran upward toward the lantern room. The manual generator occupied the corner. A pair of bicycle-like pedals connected to a flywheel. Elias reached for the tuning controls. Pedal until the green needle reaches the mark. I sat on the generator seat and pushed. The pedals resisted. The first rotation sent pain through my injured leg and shoulder. The flywheel began to turn. A low electrical hum filled the room. The needles trembled. Below us, footsteps climbed the stairs. Rook stood at the signal room door. His body blocked the entrance. I pedaled harder. The green needle rose. Elias adjusted the dials. Static burst through the speaker. This is Blackwater Light Station calling United States Coast Guard Sector, Northern New England. Only static answered. Elias changed the frequency. Blackwater Light Station calling any Coast Guard unit. A voice broke through. Weak. Blackwater identify. Relief struck me so quickly that I nearly lost rhythm. Elias looked at me. Keep going. He pressed the microphone button. This is Elias North at Blackwater Point. We have evidence of arson, attempted unlawful seizure of protected coastal trust land, and immediate threat to life. The radio crackled. State your location and number of persons. Elias answered. 2 men and 1 working dog in the lighthouse. 3 hostile persons inside the structure. 1 elderly male requires medical evacuation. Martin appeared on the stairs below. The broad man stood behind him. The younger man followed with the pry bar. Martin stopped when he saw Rook. You are making a serious mistake. I kept pedaling. You keep saying that. The Coast Guard voice returned. Blackwater, weather prevents immediate air response. A patrol boat is operating south of your position. Estimated arrival depends on access. Martin smiled. They cannot reach the cove in this sea. Elias pressed the microphone. Advise the sheriff and state police. The suspects include Martin Vale and 2 unidentified males connected to North Star Coastal Development. The broad man stepped toward Rook. Martin raised a hand. Wait. He looked at me. Do you believe this proves anything? An old deed. A dead man's notebook, photographs without context. It proves enough to make you nervous. You rescued those people tonight. That could change your life. I can make sure every newspaper in the state calls you a hero. I have been called things before. I can clear your name in the fire investigation. That means you already know how it will be blamed on me. His expression hardened. I can give Caroline her house back. That reached me. He saw it, of course he did. Men like Martin survived by finding the one wound a person could not protect. My sister's house, I asked. Her home, her saving. Everything she stands to lose. What do you want? The bag. Elias shook his head. Do not, Martin continued. Give me the documents and this ends. North Star walks away from your father's parcel. Caroline keeps the house. You receive enough money to begin again anywhere you choose. And Elias. The broad man looked at Martin. Martin did not look back. That told me what leaves meant. Rook heard something below. His head turned toward the stairwell. A new sound entered the tower, not footsteps, a woman's voice. Martin. Caroline climbed into view. Her hair was soaked and plastered against her face. She wore my father's old yellow raincoat and held a flare gun in both hands. Martin stared at her. "What are you doing here?" She aimed the flare gun at his chest. "For once, I am not letting you answer for me." Caroline stood 3 steps below Martin with the flare gun aimed at his chest. Rainwater ran from the hem of my father's yellow coat and gathered around her boots. Her hands shook, but the barrel remained steady. Martin stared at her as though she had spoken in a language he did not understand. "Put that down." "No, Caroline." I said no. The broad man shifted his weight. Rook turned toward him. A warning rolled from deep inside the dog's chest. The man stopped. Caroline climbed 1 more step. Martin lowered his voice. It was the tone he used when he wanted cruelty to sound reasonable. "You are frightened. You are not thinking clearly. I have spent 7 years believing that." "Believing what?" "That every decision you made was smarter than mine." The Coast Guard radio crackled behind me. "Blackwater Station, maintain communication. State police have been notified." Martin looked past Caroline toward the control panel. His calm expression finally broke. He moved. Rook launched from the doorway before the first step landed. He did not attack Martin. He struck the broad man instead. The man had reached inside his jacket, and Rook caught his forearm before his hand came free. They crashed against the curved stone wall. Pistol fell onto the stairs. Caroline screamed. The younger man raised the pry bar and swung at Rook's back. I left the generator. The radio needles dropped instantly. I reached the man before he could strike again. My injured shoulder would not give me power, so I used my weight and drove him into the iron railing. The pry bar hit the floor. He turned and punched me beneath the ribs. The impact folded me. For a moment the signal room tilted. Then my body remembered things my mind tried to forget. I trapped his wrist, stepped inside his balance, and sent him over the railing. He caught the iron bars with both hands. His legs swung above the stairwell. He shouted. I grabbed the back of his coat before he fell. For 1 second I considered letting go, not because I wanted him dead, because holding him sent fire through my shoulder, and survival sometimes disguises itself as permission. Then I heard June's voice in my memory. "Do you talk to yours?" I pulled the man back onto the landing. He collapsed against the wall, gasping. "Stay down." The broad man struck Rook across the head with his free hand. Rook tightened his grip. The man screamed, "Release!" Rook opened his jaws immediately and stepped back. Blood darkened the man's sleeve, but the arm was still attached and moving. Rook had done exactly what he had been trained to do. Control the threat, stop when commanded. The pistol lay near Caroline's feet. Martin saw it, so did she. They moved at the same time. Caroline kicked it down the stairs. Martin grabbed the flare gun with both hands. The barrel turned toward the wall. They struggled. "Let go," he hissed. "You burned my father's shop." "I was protecting us. You were protecting yourself." The flare gun fired. The blast filled the tower. A red flame struck the stone ceiling, ricocheted across the signal room, and landed against a stack of old charts. Fire climbed the paper instantly. Elias dragged himself toward the stove shovel. "Caleb." I grabbed a wool blanket from the wall, threw it over the burning charts, and beat the flames down. Smoke filled the circular room. Martin tore the flare gun from Caroline's hand and shoved her against the railing. Her back struck iron. She lost her balance. I caught her coat before she went over. The movement pulled my shoulder beyond anything it had left. Something gave inside the joint. The pain was white and immediate. My left arm dropped uselessly against my side. Caroline clung to me. Martin backed toward the doorway with the flare gun. His face had changed. The careful businessman was gone. What remained was a frightened man who had spent years building walls from lies and had suddenly discovered that none of them could stop the truth. "You should have signed," he said. Caroline stared at him. "You knew North Star did not own the land. I knew there was a disputed document. You knew they were going to build here with or without us. So you helped them. I tried to make certain we were paid. You accepted money before Dad died." Martin looked at me. "This family had nothing. Your father was drowning in debt. Caleb left. You stayed. I gave you a future." Caroline's expression hardened. "You used my name to borrow money. I invested in our future. You forged my signature." The words silenced the room. Even the men on the stairs looked toward him. Martin blinked. What did you say? I found the loan documents in your vehicle. How did you get here? Deputy Lawson brought me as far as the old access road. He received a call from the Coast Guard about a rescue at St. Arson. When he heard Blackwater Station mentioned, I knew where you had gone. Martin lifted the flare gun slightly. You brought the police? They are coming, you foolish woman. The contempt in his voice seemed to remove the last of Caroline's fear. She stepped away from me. No, I was foolish when I believed you. Martin glanced toward the canvas bag near Elias. The documents do not matter. North Star owns the county office. They own attorneys, engineers, inspectors, and half the people who decide what becomes legal after the fact. Elias rested against the radio console, not the Coast Guard. Martin looked at him. Old men always believe institutions remember what they were created to protect. Elias smiled faintly. Sometimes they only need reminding. The radio crackled again. Blackwater Station. State police units are approaching from the western access road. Coast Guard patrol vessel is entering the protected channel south of the point. Martin's eyes moved toward the transmitter, then toward the stairs. He had two choices: take the documents or escape. Men like Martin hated choosing because every choice required admitting that something else had been lost. He raised the flare gun toward Elias. Rook stepped between them. I moved to Rook's side. My left arm hung uselessly, but my right hand still worked. Put it down. Martin laughed once. You cannot even lift your arm. I only need one. The broad man rose behind him. Blood ran down his wrist. The younger man reached for the fallen pry bar again. Caroline saw him. Do not. He ignored her. She picked up the pistol from the lower stair where it had caught against the railing. Her hands closed around the grip. Everyone stopped. Caroline had fired a shotgun twice in her life, both times as a teenager on my father's land. She hated the noise. She hated guns, but she knew enough to keep her finger outside the trigger. Sit down, she told the younger man. He looked at Martin. Martin said nothing. The man slowly lowered himself onto the step. Caroline turned toward the broad man. You two, he said. The tower seemed to breathe around us. Wind pressed against the lantern glass above. The old light mechanism clicked and shifted, though the lamp itself remained dark. Martin still held the flare gun. It had fired its only cartridge. He knew that so did I. Caroline might not. Martin used the uncertainty. Give me the pistol. She looked at him. You think I do not know it is unloaded? His eyes narrowed. The pistol was not unloaded. But Caroline had made him wonder. I almost smiled. She had learned something from our father after all. Martin tossed the empty flare gun onto the floor. Fine. He turned toward the stairs. Rook blocked him. Martin stopped. Move the dog. No, you have no authority to hold me. You came into this station with armed men. I came to protect company property. Elias lifted the canvas bag. This property is held in public trust. Martin faced him. You think a piece of paper from a century ago will stop a development worth $60 million? No, Elias said, but the names in this ledger might. He opened the black book. Martin's confidence disappeared. Elias continued. Payments to county officials, payments to inspectors, payments to your consulting company, dates of visits to Owen Mercer, threats made after he refused to sign, the registration number of the truck used tonight. The broad man looked toward Martin. You said he had nothing. Martin ignored him. Elias turned another page. Owen also recorded the name of the man who altered the courthouse title. The younger man stood again. Caroline raised the pistol. Sit down. He remained standing. Rook turned toward him. The man sat. Martin's face had become pale. My father trusted you with this, I asked Elias. He trusted no single person. He gave pieces to several. Who else? Your sister. I looked at Caroline. She lowered the pistol slightly. I did not know what I had. What did he give you? A brass compass. My father's compass had hung above our kitchen fireplace for as long as I could remember. After his funeral, it disappeared. Caroline had told me Martin took it for safekeeping. Where is it? In my coat. She reached slowly into the yellow raincoat and removed a tarnished brass compass. One side had been dented decades earlier. My father used to say the dent came from a wave that threw him against the wheelhouse. I had believed him. Caroline pressed a hidden catch beneath the hinge. The back opened. Inside was a small memory card sealed in wax-paper paper. Martin stared at it. I do not know, she said, but you searched the house for this compass 3 times. Martin looked toward the stairway. The approaching sirens could now be heard faintly through the storm. He made his decision. He rushed Caroline. Rook intercepted him. Martin twisted sideways, avoiding the dog's jaws, and drove his elbow into Rook's injured ribs. Rook yelped. The sound tore through me. I struck Martin with my right hand. He fell against the generator. The flies wheel turned beneath his weight. The radio lights flickered. The broad man surged upward. Caroline aimed the pistol at him. He did not stop. She fired. The gunshot inside the tower was deafening. The bullet struck the iron railing inches from his hand. Sparks scattered across the stairwell. The man froze. Caroline stared at the weapon, shocked by what she had done. Her grip began to shake. "Sit down," she said again. This time he obeyed. Martin crawled toward the canvas bag. Elias tried to pull it away. Martin kicked his injured ankle. Elias cried out. Rook launched. Martin grabbed the old man by the coat and dragged him between them. Rook stopped before his teeth touched Elias. Martin wrapped one arm around Elias's throat and pulled him toward the stairs. "Back away." Rook's chest heaved. His eyes remained fixed on Martin. I stepped forward. Martin tightened his arm. Elias's face darkened. "You will kill him. That depends on you. What do you want?" "The ledger, the trust deed, and the memory card." "You will not reach the road." "I do not need the road." His eyes moved upward. The lighthouse gallery opened onto an exterior walkway above the cliffs. An emergency descent cable once connected the tower to a storage shed near the South Cove. If the cable still existed, Martin could use it to leave the tower without passing the police below. Elias had restored more than the radio. Martin might know that. "Caroline," I said, "put the pistol down." She looked at me. "Caleb, do it." Martin watched her. She lowered the weapon to the floor. "Kick it away." She did. The pistol slid beneath the radio console. Martin pulled Elias toward the next flight of stairs. "Bring the bag." I picked it up with my right hand. Rook stayed beside me. "Leave the dog. I will kill the old man. If Rook stays, I stay." Martin studied me. He needed the documents more than he feared the dog. "Fine, keep him behind you." We climbed. Caroline followed several steps below. The two hired men remained in the signal room. They had started to understand that Martin's future no longer included protecting them. The lantern room stood one level above us. Wind had broken one section of glass. Rain blew through the opening and swept across the metal floor. The old lens towered at the center, surrounded by gears and brass supports. Beyond it, a door opened onto the exterior gallery. Martin dragged Elias outside. I followed with Rook. The storm hit us with full force. The gallery circled the lighthouse nearly 100 feet above the rocks. Below, the Atlantic crashed against Blackwater Point in white explosions. A steel cable extended from the southern side of the gallery toward darkness. A pulley harness hung from a support. Martin had planned his escape, or North Star had prepared it for him. He pushed Elias against the railing. "Attach the bag to the harness." I placed the canvas bag near the cable. "You cannot carry Elias and the documents." "I am not carrying Elias." The old man looked down at the rocks. I understood. Martin intended to throw him from the tower. Caroline stepped through the doorway behind us. "Martin, stop." He glanced at her. "We can still leave together." She stared at him. "What?" "We take the documents." We reached the South Road. North Star has a vehicle waiting. "You think I am going with you?" "You are my wife." "No, I am evidence." The word struck him harder than my fist had. He tightened his grip around Elias. "You signed the agreements. Because you lied. You accepted the money. You told me it came from your contracts. You benefited from everything." Caroline took one careful step forward. Martin pressed Elias against the railing. "Do not move." She stopped. Rain ran across her face like tears, but her expression remained steady. Martin said nothing. "I defended you to Dad. I defended you to Caleb. I told myself you were difficult because you worked hard. I told myself you controlled the money because I was careless. I told myself you spoke for me because I became emotional. Caroline, you made me smaller every year, and then you convinced me I was grateful for the space." Even through the storm, I heard Elias whisper, "Keep him talking." Martin heard it too. He struck Elias across the face. Rook lunged forward. "Stay!" The dog stopped, trembling with restraint. Martin pulled Elias closer to the edge. "You think the police will believe you?" he shouted at Caroline. "Your signature is on everything. My voice is on your telephone." Martin froze. Caroline reached inside her raincoat. She held up her mobile telephone. A red recording light glowed on the screen. I started recording before I entered the tower. His face emptied. You admitted North Star paid us. You admitted the property was disputed. You admitted the documents mattered. Martin released Elias with one hand and reached for her. That was the opening. Elias dropped his weight. Martin lost balance. I moved. My right hand caught Elias's coat. Rook struck Martin's legs. Martin fell against the railing. The old iron bar broke. For one terrible second, all three men moved toward open air. I pulled Elias inward. Rook scrambled across the wet gallery. Martin went over the edge. His hands caught the broken railing. His body swung above the cliffs. Caroline screamed his name. I lowered Elias to the floor and crawled toward Martin. He looked up at me. Rain filled his eyes. Help me. The Atlantic waited beneath him. I saw my father's shop burning. I saw Martin's men carrying fuel. Iker struck in the ribs. I saw Elias's face as Martin pressed him toward the edge. Then I saw something older, a man beneath desert sun. An enemy fighter wounded beside a collapsed wall. My team leader shouting that we were leaving. My own hands dragging that man into cover because no one deserved to die, while another person's could still reach him. I lay flat against the gallery and extended my right arm. Martin reached. Our fingers touched. The railing bent farther. Take my wrist, he tried. Sp. Caroline dropped beside me and grabbed the back of my jacket. Elias wrapped one arm around the base of the lens. Rook lowered his body and gripped Martin's coat near the shoulder. Together we pulled. Martin came over the edge and collapsed onto the gallery. He coughed and clutched the metal floor. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Martin began to laugh. It was not relief, it was disbelief. You saved me, I pushed myself upright. That does not mean you are free. The lighthouse door opened behind us. Deputy Lawson stepped onto the gallery with 2 state troopers. Their weapons were raised, hands where I can see them. Martin rolled onto his back. Caroline stood slowly. The troopers moved past her and secured Martin. More officers entered the tower below. The 2 hired men were taken without further resistance. A Coast Guard medical team reached us through the lower cove shortly afterward. They placed Elias on a stretcher and stabilized his ankle. One of the medics examined my shoulder. It is dislocated. I know you need a hospital. After my dog, Rook stood near the lantern lens. He favored one side. The blow to his ribs had reopened the old injury. His breathing was shallow, and blood darkened the fur near his mouth. I knelt beside him. My left arm was useless, so I placed my right hand against his neck. Look at me. His eyes found mine. You did well. His tail moved once against the metal floor. The medic crouched beside us. There is a veterinary emergency clinic in Rockland. The state police can take him. I am going with him. Elias called from the stretcher, Caleb. I looked toward him. The bag. A state trooper had placed it beside the radio console. It is safe. No, not yet. He pointed toward the old lens. Your father hid one more thing. I almost laughed from exhaustion. He had an unhealthy relationship with secrets. Elias smiled weakly. Turn the lens toward the north window. I stood with help from the medic. The lens mechanism resisted at first. Caroline joined me. Together, we pushed until the great glass assembly rotated. A narrow compartment appeared beneath the base. Inside was a sealed metal cylinder. I removed it. The cylinder held a letter. My name was written on the envelope. Caleb. Nothing else. My father had known I would find it. Or hoped I would. I opened the letter with one hand. His handwriting was unsteady. Son, if you are reading this, then I failed to tell you the truth while I still had the chance. Blackwater was never only land. It was a promise made by people who pulled strangers from the sea and asked nothing in return. North Star wants the cliffs for private homes. Martin wants money. Others want silence. I wanted you home, but I knew asking would drive you farther away. You always returned for people in danger. I was afraid you would never return for yourself. The station belongs to the trust, but the keeper must be chosen from the rescuer's descendants. I named you, not because you were a Navy SEAL, not because you know how to fight, because when you were 12 years old, you entered freezing water to save a boy you did not even like. You came home angry at me for calling you brave. You said leaving him there would have been worse. That is the only qualification Blackwater ever required. Forgive me for keeping too much inside. Take care of your sister. Take care of the dog, and when the light goes dark, turn it back on. Dad. The words blurred. For years I had believed my father saw only the parts of me that had to fit back into civilian life. The unfinished jobs, the sleepless nights, the empty bottles I had thrown away before returning home, the silence at dinner. He had seen all of it. He had simply loved me in the same way he repaired boats. Quietly, without explaining each nail, Caroline read the letter beside me. When she reached the final lines, she covered her mouth. I thought he chose you over me. No, he left you the station. He left me a responsibility. She looked toward Martin as the troopers led him down the stairs. And me, he told me to take care of you. Her eyes hardened. I do not need you to take care of me. For the first time that night I smiled. There you are. She laughed through her tears. Then Rook made a low sound behind us. I turned. His legs folded, he collapsed beside the lighthouse lens. I reached him before his head struck the floor. Rook. His eyes remained open, but his breathing came in short, painful pulls. The medic pressed a hand against his ribs. There may be internal bleeding. The Coast Guard team lifted him onto a rescue board. I walked beside him down every step of the tower. At the bottom, dawn had begun to reach the horizon. The storm was moving east. A thin line of gray light appeared over the Atlantic. Police vehicles crowded the old access road. Emergency workers moved between the station and the North Cove. The residents from St. Arson had been transferred to ambulances. Thomas, the driver, was alive and on his way to surgery. Reporters had already gathered beyond the barricade. Cameras turned when they saw me. Then they saw Rook on the stretcher. A woman shouted, "Is that the dog who found the bus?" Another called, "Mr. Mercer, did you rescue the St. Arson residents?" I ignored them. The state police vehicle waited near the keeper's house. They placed Rook inside. I climbed in beside him. Caroline stood at the open door. "I am coming. The police need your statement. They can take it at the hospital." She sat across from me. The vehicle moved inland. Rook lay between us. I kept my hand against his neck. His pulse felt too fast. "Stay with me, partner." His eyes opened briefly. The road twisted through broken trees and flooded fields. Each mile seemed longer than the 7 we had walked to Blackwater. Caroline watched me. "He found the station, did he not?" "Yes, he found the tunnel. Yes, he found the radio. Yes." She reached down and touched the pale fur beneath his throat. "And he found the bus." I looked at her. "He found me first." Rook's breathing weakened. The driver turned on the emergency lights. The siren rose above the clearing storm. I leaned close to Rook's ear. "You do not leave me now." His ear moved. "You hear me?" His tail struck the floor once, then his eyes closed. The veterinary clinic appeared ahead. Its doors opened before the vehicle stopped. 3 people ran toward us with a rolling stretcher. They took Rook from my hands. I followed until a veterinarian blocked the treatment room door. "We need space. I am his handler, I understand." "No, you do not." She looked directly at me. "I understand that standing here will not help him." The door closed. For the first time since the fire began, there was nothing left for me to do. No tunnel to enter, no bus to reach, no enemy to stop. Only a white hallway, a broken shoulder, and a door behind which the one living creature who had never abandoned me was fighting for breath. Caroline sat beside me. Neither of us spoke. Morning sunlight entered through the clinic windows. The storm had passed, but the longest wait of my life had only begun. The treatment room door stayed closed for 47 minutes. I counted every one of them. The clock above the reception desk had a second hand that clicked loudly enough to fill the hallway. Each time it completed a circle, I told myself Rook had survived one more minute. That was not how surgery worked. It was how fear worked. Caroline sat beside me with my father's yellow raincoat folded across her lap. Mud dried along the sleeves. Her hair had begun to curl as it dried, just as it had when we were children. Neither of us spoke. A nurse had placed my left arm in a temporary sling, but I had refused medication stronger than the tablets in my bag. I needed my mind clear when the veterinarian came through that door. I had spent years learning how to wait for bad news. There was always a room, always a clock, always someone avoiding your eyes. Sometimes a chaplain stood nearby. Sometimes an officer held a folded flag. Sometimes the news arrived over a radio while you were still covered in somebody else's blood. I knew every version of waiting. This was worse, because Rook had never asked me to take him into danger. He had simply followed. The treatment room door opened. A woman in blue surgical clothing stepped into the hallway. Her mask hung beneath her chin. A dark strand of hair had come loose across her forehead. I stood too quickly, the walls shifted. Caroline caught my good arm. The veterinarian looked at me. "Are you Caleb Mercer?" "Yes, I am Dr. Naomi Shaw. How is he?" She took one breath before answering. That breath nearly stopped my heart. "Rook is alive." My knees weakened. I gripped the back of the chair. Dr. Shaw continued. "He suffered 2 fractured ribs. One punctured the outer lining of his right lung. There was also bleeding around the spleen, but we controlled it without removing the organ. Will he live? The next 12 hours are critical." "Will he live?" She held my gaze. "I believe he has a good chance." A good chance. I had heard those words before. They were better than no chance. They were not enough. "Can I see him for a few minutes?" She led me through the treatment door. The room smelled of disinfectant, warm plastic, and wet fur. Rook lay inside a recovery enclosure beneath a gray blanket. A clear tube ran beneath his nose. Bandages wrapped his chest. One front leg had been shaved for an intravenous line. He looked smaller. That was the first thing I noticed. Not weaker, smaller, as if removing the harness and the posture and the alertness had revealed the animal beneath the duty. I knelt beside him. My shoulder protested, but I barely felt it. "Hey, partner." One ear moved. His eyes opened halfway. They found me. His tail did not move. He did not have the strength. But his breathing changed. A little slower, a little easier. Dr. Shaw stood behind me. "He knows you are here." "I know." I placed my right hand against the side of his face. The fur near his jaw was still damp from the storm. "You went too far this time." His eye remained fixed on me. "I told you to stay behind me." His ear moved again. I almost laughed, then my throat closed. "I am sorry." The words came out broken. "I should have protected you." Rook lifted his head less than an inch. He tried to press into my palm. The effort exhausted him. I leaned closer. "You do not have to work anymore." His eyes stayed open. No bullets, no searching buildings. No standing between me and men with guns. His breathing remained soft beneath the machine. "You have done enough." That was when I understood why the words hurt. For years I had measured my own value by the same rule. Search, protect, carry, fight, survive. As long as I could still do those things, I had a reason to remain. When I could not, I believed I had become a burden. Disposable, temporary, exactly what Martin had called me without using the words. I rested my forehead against the edge of Rook's enclosure. "You were never valuable because of what you could do for me." His eye closed slowly. "You were valuable because you stayed." The machine continued its quiet rhythm. I breathed with it. For the first time in years, I let myself cry without turning away. I did not apologize for it. When I returned to the hallway, Deputy Lawson was waiting. He held a paper cup of coffee in one hand and a clear evidence bag in the other. Inside the bag was my father's brass compass. Caroline stood near the window, speaking with a state trooper. Lawson looked at my sling. "You should have that shoulder treated." My dog was first, so I heard. He offered me the coffee. I accepted it. It tasted terrible. I drank it anyway. "Martin is in custody," Lawson said. "So are the 2 men with him." Names: Harold Pike and Sean Willis. Both have worked private security jobs for North Star subsidiaries. They burned the shop. Pike is asking for an attorney. Willis is asking for a deal. That was quick. Men discover loyalty has limits when they are the ones facing prison. He lifted the evidence bag. "Your sister told us about the memory card. Have you opened it?" "Not yet. The State Police Cybercrime Unit will create a forensic copy." "Then, why bring it here?" "Because she wanted you to see something first." Caroline approached. Her face looked older than it had the night before. Not from the storm, from the truth. She took the compass from Lawson and opened the hidden compartment. The memory card was gone, already secured as evidence. Beneath the waxed paper had been another folded strip. She removed it carefully. My father's handwriting covered both sides. Caroline handed it to me. "Caleb and Caroline, a lighthouse has 2 purposes. It warns people away from danger. It also shows them where home is. You have spent too many years believing those are different things. They are not. Protect each other. Tell the truth even when it costs you. And do not let anyone convince you that being lost means you are beyond finding." "Dad," Caroline looked down. "He wrote both our names." "Yes, I thought he trusted you and not me. He trusted you with the compass. I gave it to Martin. You took it back, after I helped him sign away everything. You cannot change that." Her eyes filled. "I know. You can change what happens next." She looked at me. I do not know what happens next, neither did I, but for the first time, not knowing did not feel like falling. Dr. Shaw insisted that I go to the hospital across town. My shoulder was reduced under sedation, then secured in a brace. The physician told me I had torn tissue and would need weeks of rest. I told him I had never been skilled at rest. He said that was not a medical exemption. By noon, the storm had moved into open water. News of the St. Arson rescue spread across Maine. The first report called me a former rescue worker. The second called me a retired Navy man. By evening, one station had somehow learned I had served as a Navy Sea Air and Land operator. Then every station used the words Navy SEAL, as though they explained why I had entered a flooded bus. They did not. Training gave me skills. Rook gave me direction. The people trapped inside gave me a reason. Arthur, the man with the Navy cap, spoke to reporters from his hospital bed. He told them I was stubborn, poorly dressed, and had arrived with the finest dog in the state of Maine. June held her son's photograph during her interview. She said Rook had sat beside her until she stopped shaking. Mara told the truth about Thomas. She made certain everyone knew the driver had kept the bus against the guardrail long enough for the passengers to climb toward the roof. Thomas survived surgery. He lost part of his left foot. He later said that was a fair price for keeping 11 people alive. I disagreed with the word fair. I understood what he meant. Rook survived the first 12 hours, then the next 12. On the second morning, he stood for 3 seconds. On the third, he ate from my hand. Dr. Shaw warned that he might never regain the endurance required for working dog duties. I told her he was retired. Rook looked at me as though no one had consulted him. The investigation moved faster than Martin expected. Sean Willis confessed that Martin had hired him and Harold Pike to set the bait shop fire. North Star's regional director had approved the payment through a security company. Their goal had been to destroy my father's records and create enough damage to force an emergency insurance settlement. Martin had prepared the accusation against me in advance. He had copied portions of my military medical history from documents Caroline kept in their home. He planned to tell investigators I had become angry about the sale, entered a dissociative state, and burned the shop. Willis had been instructed to leave one of my old fuel cans near the eastern wall. Rook found the men before they could finish. The memory card in the compass contained recordings my father had made during meetings with Martin and 2 North Star representatives. Their voices were clear. They discussed the altered county title. They discussed the public trust. They discussed buying the last remaining descendants who might challenge the transfer. Then Martin asked what would happen if I refused. A North Star executive answered, "Veterans with his history are easy to discredit." I listened to that recording once, only once. My father's voice came next. "You have mistaken a quiet man for a weak one." I stopped the audio there. The state attorney general opened an investigation into North Star Coastal Development. County records were seized. 3 officials resigned before they could be questioned. One property inspector attempted to leave the country and was arrested at an airport in Boston. North Star's attorneys claimed that the company knew nothing about the fire. The ledger said otherwise. Bank records said otherwise. Sean Willis said otherwise. The truth had spent years beneath stone. Once released, it moved faster than any of them could contain. The original Blackwater Trust was validated by a state court 6 weeks later. North Star never owned the station. It never owned the lighthouse. It never owned the North Cove. The company's planned resort was suspended, then canceled. Martin was charged with conspiracy, arson, fraud, forgery, evidence tampering, and several financial crimes that took lawyers 3 pages to name. Harold Pike faced the same arson charges and an additional weapons charge. Sean Willis received a reduced sentence in exchange for testimony. Caroline filed for divorce. She also turned over every bank statement, contract, and message she could find. Some people in town blamed her. They said she should have known. Others said she was as innocent as the rest of us. The truth was less comfortable. She had ignored warnings because believing Martin had seemed easier than confronting him. She had signed documents she had not read. She had allowed fear to make decisions that harmed other people. But when the moment came, she climbed a lighthouse during a hurricane and faced him. A person can be responsible for yesterday and still choose courage today. Both truths can exist. Elias spent nearly a month recovering from his broken ankle and head injury. When I visited him, he complained about hospital food, modern televisions, and nurses who would not allow him to repair the window latch. He never complained about pain. That worried me more. One afternoon, I brought him the restored black ledger after investigators had completed their copies. He ran his hand across the cover. Your father would have hated how many officials handled this. He labeled his tool drawers by the person allowed to touch them. I was not allowed to touch any. That meant he liked you. Elias nodded. I know. We sat quietly. Then he looked at my shoulder brace. You accepted the appointment? What appointment? Keeper of Blackwater. No one asked. The trust names you. A dead man named me. Dead men create most of the responsibilities worth keeping. I do not know how to run a lighthouse. The light is mostly automated now. I do not know how to maintain a rescue station. You rescued 11 people before learning where the restroom was. That does not make me qualified. Elias leaned back against the hospital pillow. What are you afraid of? The answer rose immediately. I did not speak it. He waited. Old men who understand silence can be dangerous. Finally, I said, staying. Why? Because leaving is something I know how to do. And staying? That gives people time to discover what is wrong with you. Elias studied me. Rook already knows. I looked toward the doorway. Rook lay there wearing a padded recovery vest. His ribs were healing, but Dr. Shaw still limited his movement. He had followed me slowly into the room and refused the blanket a nurse placed beside the bed. He is a dog. He is a better judge of character than most boards of trustees. Rook lifted his head. Elias pointed toward him. That animal followed you through fire, flood, and men with weapons. He has seen what is wrong with you. Thank you. And he stayed. I had no answer. Elias looked toward the window. The station does not need a hero, Caleb. Heroes are exhausting. It needs someone who will keep the roof repaired, answer the radio, and turn on the light when weather comes. That sounds less impressive. It is, he smiled. That is why it matters. I accepted the position 3 days later. Not permanently. That was what I told myself. I agreed to oversee repairs while the trust board reorganized. I agreed to remain through winter. I agreed to train volunteers and restore the emergency equipment. Temporary promises feel safer. Blackwater did not care what I called them. The town came together in a way I had forgotten towns could. Fishermen replaced the North Cove doors. Retired electricians rewired the radio room. Students from the high school cleared brush from the old access road. Arthur arrived wearing his Navy cap and announced that the rescue skiff had been stored incorrectly for at least 50 years. No one had the courage to ask how he knew. June organized blankets and medical supplies. She placed her son's photograph on a shelf inside the signal room. He always wanted to see the ocean, she said. Mara created an emergency list for every St. Arson resident, including medication, mobility needs, family contacts, and the name of each person's pet. Thomas visited using crutches. He stood beside the restored aluminum boat for a long time. Then he placed one hand on the hull. Good machine, he said. It nearly sank. He smiled. We both had help. Caroline reopened our father's house. The bait shop was gone, but the foundation remained. Instead of rebuilding it as a business, she proposed turning the site into a workshop for families of veterans and coastal rescue volunteers. I thought it was too ambitious. She said that was fear speaking. I told her not to become wise all at once, we argued. Then we made plans. Rook recovered slowly. His right lung healed. The fractured ribs joined. The scar beneath his coat grew wider. He could walk the cliff trail by early spring, though he tired after a mile. He hated every rest stop and looked personally insulted whenever I carried water for him. I never placed his old working harness on him again. Instead, he wore a simple brown collar with a brass tag. Rook, Blackwater Point Home. The final word had been Caroline's idea. I pretended not to like it. On the first anniversary of the storm, the town gathered beneath the lighthouse. The sky was clear. The Atlantic rolled against the cliffs in long blue lines. St. Arson residents occupied the front row beneath wool blankets. Arthur wore a new Navy cap because he said the old one had become famous and therefore unreliable. Thomas stood with a cane. Elias sat beside the lighthouse door, his repaired ankle stretched before him. Caroline waited near the control switch. The restored light had passed every inspection. We planned to activate it at sunset. A reporter asked me to say a few words. I had prepared none. Public speaking had always seemed more dangerous than entering a flooded vehicle. Rook sat beside me. I rested my hand on his head. People grew quiet. I looked at the station, the cliffs, and the faces of those who had helped rebuild what a few men had tried to erase. My father believed Blackwater was a promise, I said. My voice carried farther than I expected. A promise that when people are lost, someone will look for them. The wind moved gently across the crowd. I spent a long time believing rescue was something one person did for another. I was wrong. I looked down at Rook. The person who reaches for you may also be the reason you survive. Rook leaned against my leg. This station exists because fishermen entered dangerous water for strangers. It survived because an old keeper protected the truth. It returned because a town decided memory was worth more than money. Caroline lowered her eyes. And I am standing here because a dog refused to leave me in the dark. No one applauded immediately. I was grateful for that. Some words need silence before they can be carried. Then June began clapping. Arthur joined her. The sound spread through the crowd. I looked toward the horizon until it passed. At sunset, Caroline placed her hand over the switch. She looked at me. Together, I placed my hand beside hers. We turned it. The lens above us came alive. A warm beam crossed the gallery, moved over the cliffs and reached into the evening ocean. It continued north, then east, then south. Every face followed it. Elias closed his eyes. Rook watched the light pass across the ground. When it returned, it caught the pale fur beneath his throat and made it glow. That night, after everyone had left, I sat outside the keeper's house with Rook beside me. The air smelled of salt and new grass. Far below, waves moved through the North Cove. The lighthouse beam crossed the darkness at regular intervals. Each time it passed, the world appeared for a moment. The stone wall, the rescue boat, the trail, Rook's silvering face. Then darkness returned, but it was no longer empty. I had learned that light does not defeat darkness forever. It returns again and again, that is enough. Rook placed his head on my boot. I looked toward the house behind us. My bag rested inside. Not packed, not waiting near the door. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I owned more than I could carry. Tools, books, a second chair for Caroline, a medical kit Mara insisted was too small, a photograph of my father beside his boat, June's spare coffee pot, Rook's blanket near the stove. None of it felt like a trap. It felt like evidence I had stayed. The radio inside the station crackled. A fisherman reported engine trouble 2 miles offshore. Not an emergency yet, but the fog was moving in. I stood. Rook rose beside me. His body was slower now, his eyes were not. "You are retired," I reminded him. He walked toward the radio. I followed. The lighthouse beam crossed the sea once more. My father had been right. It warned people away from danger. It showed them where home was. And sometimes, for a man who believed he had lost both, it did something even more important. It showed him they could be the same place. Caleb believed his worth came from his ability to fight, rescue, and carry the weight for everyone around him. Rook taught him something quieter and far more important. A person does not earn love by remaining useful. Sometimes healing begins when we stop running, allow others to stand beside us, and accept that home is not merely the place we inherited. Home is the place where the truth is protected, the light is kept burning, and no one is abandoned in the dark. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next story in our collection. Every subscription helps us continue sharing meaningful stories of second chances, faithful dogs, and ordinary people who find the courage to become whole again.